In 211, we learned about schools, not just the building, but what happens behind the front doors. Someday we all want to be the perfect teacher, a model for our students, but it can also work the other way around, and we could accidentally be a bad model. We need to show commitment to our students and investment in their lives inside and outside the classroom. Hopefully they will see this and strive for success. Some things in education, however, are inherent. Sorting is nearly inevitable, but it is how we deal with the sorting that matters. Done in an appropriate manner, sorting can be beneficial to all students. As frustrating as teaching may be sometimes, we as teachers cannot let ourselves boil over and use the fear of our students to satisfy our needs. Students are going through enough at this stage in their lives. The last thing they need is a teacher scaring them into learning difficult content. Another common issue that can arise on both sides of the equation is bluffing. This is making it seem like one thing is true when in reality it is not. If we expect our students to do the work and prepare, we better be willing to prepare as well and not fake like we did. This mutual trust that neither side willingly and regularly bluffs will go a long way. Shoving is another common issue that should be addressed in schools. This act can take the form of physical confrontation or simply the infringement on one's previously occupied space. This issue is larger than it may seem because it is basically the stepping stones and basis of bullying. Bullying has been in public schools essentially since the beginning and is a very difficult issue to combat. Bullying is so hard to deal with for a number of reasons. Schools have been working to eradicate it by instituting bully-free zones and anti-bullying campaigns. However, very few of them look at what truly is the underlying issue that causes bullying. Even understanding these root causes will not make it easy to get rid of bullying because it is rooted in a number of factors which create diversity but also create points of contention. These factors include race, which is skin color, ethnicity, culture, and nationality; religion, which can span different races but is a source of major conflict in today's world; political affiliation, which is a topic that should be talked about but not forced, and some issues such as gender identification and sexuality are often highly politicized; and finally, socioeconomic status, or how wealthy or not wealthy a student, their family, and their community may be.
.241 focuses more on the science and psychology of students, including cognition and development, social cognition and social development, and moral cognition and moral development. We also talked about behavior and behaviorism, including Pavlov and his dogs and Skinner and his birds, to learn about the different types of reinforcement and how that can be used in school. Another thing we talked about was motivation, including intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic is what you feel, how people are motivated internally, and extrinsic is how people are motivated externally. The other thing we talked about was classroom management, and that could be anything from arranging your room to arranging the desks. And then one of the last things we talked about was assessment, and different types of assessment, including things such as essay and multiple choice, and how you can use different types of assessment to reach all students. And that's what we learned in 241.
So, in EDFN 211 with Tim, we learned about educational philosophy, and in 241 with Dr. Hanich, we learned about educational psychology. But how do these two different things come together into the classroom to make us better teachers so that we can become better able to serve our students? In 211, we learned about how to reach kids in diverse learning environments. And in 241, we learned about how to better understand them so that we can teach them content. We need both of these things, though, in order to allow us to become awesome, amazing, and inspiring teachers. One of the most important aspects of being an awesome, amazing, inspiring teacher is commitment. Commitment is more than just showing up each day on autopilot and collecting a paycheck. Commitment is about getting each individual student to learn while still teaching the whole class and keeping the entire room engaged. Now, content aside, kids need to feel safe at school, and it is our job as teachers to make sure that that is happening at all times. In order to do this, we need to have a good understanding of our students' personal lives, because we are not with them 24/7, but what they bring in from the outside still affects them when they are in the classroom. It is our responsibility as teachers to care about students just like we would our own kids. We have to motivate them to learn by doing things such as varying course content. And also, we need to model a positive attitude towards that content, because students will only care about those classes as much as we do. The job never ends as a teacher, and in order to be a good teacher, you have to always be committed. And this is because commitment leads to student success.
How do we go from just knowing our subject matter to actually teaching students that content in a classroom setting? This concept may be more difficult than it seems. We all have our various subjects full of content that we are all very passionate about. This is what many see as the purpose of school, as these are the subjects that are tested and are supposedly presented in order for our students to use them in the big, scary real world. Knowing a good variety of these subjects and being well-rounded is important, but it is not the only thing that makes school important. Just knowing content is not going to make a good teacher, nor is it going to make a good student. Just knowing facts and formulas through processes such as rote memorization will allow the student and the teacher to make it seem like the content has been mastered, but in reality, when the student needs to put this knowledge into real-world application, they will be lost. This is a form of bluffing. Just knowing information may make you, the teacher, and the students seem smart, but in reality, this is just one half of the equation. The second half comes in understanding your students, their lives, backgrounds, tendencies, personalities, quirks, needs, and learning styles. The student-teacher relationship is often seen as the most important factor. In order for a teacher to be successful in teaching the students, we must work with our students, not against them. Individualizing learning will help students see value and importance in the content, while creativity makes for better student engagement as well as making school a fun environment for learning. This will hopefully create a sense of intrinsic motivation in students that will cause them to want to come to school and learn. These two sides of the equation, knowing the subject matter and knowing the students, should ultimately create a successful learning environment. This process is not immediate and will take some time, experience, and maybe even some failure, but one day it should allow all of us to become amazing, outstanding, inspiring teachers of children.
The next thing we're going to talk about is content in light of 211 and 241. So the first thing is, content is important, but don't bluff. You have to know the material you're teaching, because if you don't, your students aren't going to take the time to learn material either, because if you haven't learned it, why should they learn it? Second thing is, social studies is important, but what's more important is building a relationship. You have to build a relationship with your students. You have to know what's going on in your students' lives. You need to know how they're doing in the class. You need to care about them personally, because if you do, they'll want to learn. And that basically moves into number 3, which is students will want to learn if you care about them. You need to care about your students. You need to know what's going on in their lives. You need to know what they need, what their needs are. You need to understand how they learn, because if you do, they'll want to learn and they'll care about you in return. So basically what I'm trying to say is 1 + 2 + 3 equals 6? Awesome. But that's not important. What is important is content is important, but it's not as important as knowing your students and creating a relationship with them. Because if you do, they'll want to learn. And that's the purpose of school, is creating a relationship so it can foster appropriate learning.
During my time in the field at William Penn High School in York, I got to observe some very diverse classrooms in biology remediation. These students are struggling in biology and have not passed the keystones in biology yet. It is not uncommon for each period when the students walk in and the typical pre-class chatter begins to hear the majority of the class speaking Spanish. Also, there's a large number of students that need translated tests. An
experience I had from the field included motivation, and specifically motivating students, because a lot of the teachers in my field experience wanted to motivate their students, but they had no idea how. Sometimes they blamed it on their parents, sometimes they blamed it on how they were raised, that they just don't care about school. So at the end of the day, the teachers understood that they needed to motivate their students, but didn't understand that it's their job to motivate them, that teachers have to motivate students.
Recently, as in within the past 20 years, standardized testing has been put in place due to legislation which is meant to encourage student success and uniformity across the nation. However, it has started receiving some backlash because it is not individualized or creative, two keys to successfully teaching a subject. However, these concepts have been overlooked because these standardized tests are being used to determine funding for schools, all based on the students' scores, which are measured against the other scores from across the nation. Despite all this emphasis on MAP testing, PSSAs, and keystones, children are not succeeding because these tests are not exactly matching up with the required skills that were put in place back when the legislation was going in, such as Common Core. It is not telling teachers what to teach, but how to teach in ways which were not congruent with the standardized tests. Schools like Devers K-8 held a strong emphasis on standardized testing, as was evident in the data wall in the back of the 7th and 8th grade math classroom. However, as the wall showed, only one student was advanced, where roughly 1/4 was proficient, and the large majority of the students were basic or below basic. On these standardized tests, individualization and creativity need to be brought back into education.
That's all, folks.